You don't like the Drake?
I hate the Drake.
I love the Drake.
How could you not like the Drake?
Who's the Drake?
Who's the Drake?
The Drake is good. Do you like the Drake?
I love the Drake.
What about the Drake? Oh, screw the Drake. I love the Drake.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake comic podcast. This podcast will take a chronological look at the third Robin, Tim Drake. We will be looking at the classic 90s 2000 Robin series and other notable comics with Tim in that era, while also simultaneously taking a look at Tim in the modern era as Red Robin in the pages of DC Comics, plus other Robin and Batman happenings in the world. So sit back, relax, and find out why everyone loves the Drake.
Good for them. Love the Drake.
Got to love the Drake.
I'm impressed. What can I say? I'm irresistible.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake comic podcast. I'm your host, Rob Myers. Welcome to episode 61. This podcast is brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and Robin. We're also part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network and also part of the Batman on Film, BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. You can get a hold of us through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just search Everyone Loves the Drake. Twitter is at ELTD Podcast. You can email into the show at Robin ELTD Podcast, and you can check us out on YouTube at Robin Everyone Loves the Drake Podcast. With me, as always, is Terence. Terence, how are you doing today, sir?
I am doing great, Rob. I'm ready to crack into some old books from the actual 90s. We're out of the 80s now into the 90s,
I know.
and everything old is new again in the world of Tim Drake. So everything's great. But hey, speaking of old stuff, I gotta admit, when you told me the last episode was going to be the Zero issue, and you had this book that you've had since you were like, what, 8 or 9, with the Kool-Aid stains on it. Personally, I thought it was cool. I was like, oh, this is cool. I like this, but I didn't know how, like the audience would take it, and even you, I think you were a little skeptical because many times you were like, oh man, thanks for the indulgent. Like if you didn't like this isn't the new format of the show. No. But I have to say, if the people who hated it were quiet, and the people who listened to it gave us a lot of positive feedback on that. There was a lot of cool comments about it. I got to find where it was. John Ritter. I'm sorry, not John Ritter. He's from Three's Company. Jason Ritter. Sorry, Jason. He probably gets that all the time too. But Jason Ritter said, really enjoyed. Hope you do more of these kinds of episodes. So I was like, oh, cool. Because I really liked it. And what I thought was cool too was from some of the listeners, like it brought back childhood memories, not necessarily of that book, but of things that they had when they were a kid. And like our good buddy Rich, who's a good fan of the show, wrote about how he had these 7-Eleven cups from the 70s that his mom had got them, and on the back were descriptions of like not Tim Drake, that he wasn't around yet, but Dick Grayson, the other Robin, but Dick Grayson and Alfred Pennyworth and Bruce Wayne, and he would like read the cups, and hearing you talk about the book brought back those memories. And it brought back like a lot of memories of like those little Batman things that you had as a kid that are now gone. And the funny thing I was thinking too is if anybody's seen your YouTube videos, you've got a lot of valuable stuff in that room, a lot of hot toys, but I bet you like if there was your house was on fire and you could grab one thing, you'd grab that Kool-Aid stained book that probably is worth like 75 cents on eBay over things that are worth a heck of a lot more. And same here, like I would grab above anything that my very first comic I got, which was the Death in the Family trade paperback that my mom bought me, and even the book, not to be corny here, but the book that you got me, the Robin #1 signed by, Chuck Dixon, that has no value on eBay. There's not a lot of people who want Robin 1 with Terence written across the front of it. But the fact that you bought that book for me and then contacted Chuck Dixon, then sent it to Chuck Dixon, then he sent it back, then you sent it to me. Like, that has more value than actual like what it's worth. So I thought that was pretty cool. The feedback and bringing back a lot of good memories for people.
I think that's the thing about, like, I'm an action figure collector. If you've seen, my YouTube channel, if you've seen all the stuff that I buy, even just the Tim Drake Robin stuff that I'll post on the Twitter or Instagram or whatever. But it's like the toys of like the 70s. If you have the original Luke Skywalker from, the very first Star Wars, and it's in its original box, that's pristine. You want to have that. But the stuff now that I see people collecting, the new Star Wars figures, and they've got them in their box, I'm like, those are a dime a dozen. It's the little things that, like, I got this book as a kid, or, I've got the comic that Chuck sent the three of us, signed to each one of us, and I have that, hanging up on the wall right now. So you're talking about in the fire, I'll grab that book and, swipe that one off the wall. But it's the dumb little things of your childhood that I shouldn't even call them dumb, that make you go, man, it's like that book I said in the last show. I took it with me everywhere. It was like my security blanket, for lack of a better description. So I think those are the things that, now as we're adults still talking about Batman, that book and those little, my first little superpowers figures that I had, those things make me think of a really cool time, and knowing that thing that I love so much is still continuing. So it made me feel good that a lot of people on the podcast were sending good notes. Professor Frenzy here, who does bat books for beginners, he had replied on Twitter, that was a lot of fun. Michael Frecker, if I'm saying that right, please forgive me. It says Rob's computer voice, and there's some emojis of him laughing. I've got more replies on the computer voice. So, and I forget who you said that liked it and wanted more of it. Then I started going, oh crap, I'm gonna have to do more of those. Yeah.
There's a whole subgenre of podcasting. Yeah.
Right. Rob, read this. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And Professor Frenzy, he's pretty awesome. He always retweets our podcast when it comes out. We appreciate that. There's several people on Twitter who do that, and we really appreciate that. And there's a couple people who are kind of new to the show, so I don't know when they'll get to this, but I know one of them. I think if you found the other one, Sherry Sherwood. Mm-hmm. She had reached out to us on Facebook, and I think she's getting back into comics with The Lonely Place of Living, which we'll talk about in a minute. But she had sent us and said that she had started on episode 1 and is working her way up the episodes, and she's on about, like, I think 20 or so now. So Sherry, I don't know when in the future you'll catch up to this and get it, and hopefully you've stuck with it. Hopefully when the Terence guy appears, you're not like, oh, forget this show, I'm done with this. I liked it the other way. Yeah. But we appreciate you reaching out to us, and we hope you enjoy it and continue to listen. I had a question for you, Rob, because you went away on vacation and we saw a little Tim Drake went with you. Yeah. But did you get any odd looks through security having a Tim Drake figure with you, or was he in the stowaway luggage?
He was in my Batman backpack my wife got me on our 9th anniversary the previous year, which is really cool backpack. It's got a spot for like iPads, and it's really, not form-fitting, but it's got like foam padding in it to protect stuff. Traveling abroad, now I can say it, TSA, they don't find stuff funny. So like all that stuff, I just kind of kept quiet and went through the metal detectors. And so I told Tim, just be quiet, don't say nothing. I don't think Bruce even knows. I don't think Bruce knows you left the country. You had mentioned Lonely Place of Living. And some of you may have saw the poll that I put up and like, hey, help pick our next episode. And Terence and Ryan had a really good idea that I was like, oh, we're going to cover this live with everything. But then Terence and I got to talking right before that we would be spending the episodes after each issue going, well, what do you think's going to happen? I don't know. What do you think's going to happen? Unless one of us had some crazy, zany, idea, we thought it would be better to let everything collect and be done. Terrence also gets his books from a discount comic book service. Is that right?
Yeah, they have ads in DC Comics. They have a thing where like our prices are so low, DC doesn't let us say what they are. We're not sponsored by them.
No.
I'd like to be. I sent them an email asking if they'd want to sponsor us, and they were nice enough to send an email back saying no, not at this time. So that was like nice. They didn't just delete the email, but
Right.
yeah, they're not sponsored in any way. But I highly recommend them. If you don't have a local comic book store, my local comic book store is a good, 30 minutes away, and it's in a way that I don't go. So it's really out of the way. So it's very convenient. So, but I did read Lonely Place of Living. I did. I'm going to buy so many copies of this book. I bought. I had ordered both covers, the regular standard one and the alternate cover, and I bought it digitally also. And I'm sure I'll buy the trade paperback when that comes out.
Same
too.
here.
So I have read it, and I am pretty familiar with it. And one of our Facebook followers, Evan Galdine, I hope I said that right, said the preview came out, like the first 3 or 4 pages, and he said, "Are they finally fixing Tim's origin?" ? And I replied, "I think so!" ! So yes, it's been quite exciting. Part 1.
Yeah.
And when you said we it was a fairly heated discussion. It was about as heated as Rob and I get, whether to devote the entire podcast to Lonely Place of Living or actually do some Prodigal. But we've decided we're going to talk about Lonely Place of Living just a little bit here, and then devote the majority of the episode to Prodigal.
Yeah, I think it'll allow us to, once Prodigal is completed for us, Lonely Place of Living will be done, completed, and maybe even collected. And probably not collect at that point, but then we can kind of talk it as an event and spend, maybe 2 or possibly 3 podcasts just talking about that event and kind of really welcoming Tim back.
And let me say, sorry to interrupt you there, Rob, but I pulled a total, what Batman villain would do this? Maybe like an Oswald Cobblepot or just an underhand move, because Rob really wanted to do this Lonely Place of Living, and I wanted to do Prodigal, and I'd known in a text that Ryan had wanted to side with me. So when we were texting back and forth, I was like, well, let's just make it a vote. Let's just have a democracy. Let's just do a vote, and let's see. Rob votes for one, I vote for the other. We'll let Ryan be the tiebreaker, fully knowing which side Ryan was on and which one he would vote. Yes. If I knew Ryan was on your side, I never would have suggested a vote, like
that's
democracy.
Funny.
So, but unfortunately, and you can hear Ryan, we haven't just like totally talked over him and neglected him. Unfortunately, he can't be with us today. He's got a lot of family stuff going on this weekend, and so we wish him and his wife and his daughter, nothing but the best, and hope everything goes well with them. But he can't be here, but hopefully he'll be back soon. So sorry, Rob. Go ahead. What were you saying about Lonely Place of Living?
I don't know. I think Ryan, I'm going to refer to him as Russia right now. I think he got in this election and messed everything up. No, this is not a political podcast at all. That's for Rick Shue to handle over on his podcast. No, I think with just Lonely Place of Living, we thought that would be better to let everybody get it, read it, and then they can come to listen to us, a few episodes down the line, and then kind of celebrate the story with us. Terrence and I had speculated, I think a couple episodes ago, of who's in the cell with Tim, who Mr. Oz could potentially be. So I'll kick it over to you, Terrence. Who were your top runners for who Mr. Oz could be? Who were your top choices? Or I think maybe you only really had one. So what was your guess? And then who is, in fact, Mr. Oz? Yeah, and first of all, total spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, stop now. But we had talked about this, and the podcasts blur together to me because before we record the podcast, all week I'm thinking about what I'm going to say on the podcast. And then we record the podcast, and then I think about what I should have said or did say after, and then I listen to it, and then sometimes we recorded a couple things that we lost due to technical difficulties, and I know you spliced some things around, so then I can't remember when or where we had the discussion of who Mr. Oz might be. So it may be out there on a podcast, or it may have just been in my head, or it may have been one of the things that was lost. I'm pretty sure it was real, though. Surprise, this is an edit into the show. I went back and I started going through the episodes because Terrence was like, did I dream that we had this discussion? Did it get lost in the editing? So this is, in fact, a real thing, Terrence. You and I did have this discussion. I thought it'd be interesting to go back and play the actual audio. At the time that we recorded this episode, I just, asked, well, what were your guesses? And we were, just kind of talking about it. But I thought this would be cool to actually hear our guesses back from episode 57, which is where this came from. And 57 wasn't that long ago. The episode was released on July 19th, and we were just finishing the Robin issue that concluded Nightfall to kind of give you some perspective of how long ago that was. So it wasn't that far. It was just in July, and this is getting ready. This episode you're listening to is obviously October. But these were our guesses of who Mr. Oz was, or who Tim possibly saw in the cell. Here's an Ice Terrence's actual guesses, and then we'll go back to present time. So I hope you enjoy this little trip down memory lane just a few months ago. So let's see how close Terrence and I guessed the things that Lonely Place of Living gave us. So here we go. Let's go back in our time machine just about 3 months ago. So here you go.
Whoa, this is heavy. There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
Did you want to lay down a prediction of who is in that cell next to Tim Drake that he can't leave for, or?
Wow. I'm not sure. I go between the Batman Beyond version of Tim Drake that he could see himself, and then I have a prediction for Oz next. So if it's not seeing his older self from the future, I want to say it's going to be Connor Kent. So that would be my guess, that it's Connor Kent, Superboy. So I don't know how they're going to play that with having John Kent, the current Superboy, with Damian. And then my guess for Mr. Oz, that if it's not young Tim Drake or Batman Beyond version Tim Drake, that's who Mr. Oz is. So that's my prediction. I'm probably wrong. Terrence, do you have a guess?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the logical thing would be it'd be somebody Tim knows, so that goes Connor or Bart Allen, and then if you figure Jeff Johns is a big part of it, and you look at his Teen Titans run, because writers tend to go with characters that they've, worked with or really like. But at this point, it could be anybody. I don't know. But if I had to bet on somebody, I'd have to probably say Connor Kent. Ozzy, or Mr. Oz, there's maybe it's Ozymandias from The Watchmen.
Right.
At first, it's not Dr. Manhattan, because he was in something else, and he's been placed somewhere else. I had a thought that maybe he might actually be a good guy, because if you look, he kind of saved Tim Drake's life,
right,
by doing that. And then he saved Superman by taking away Doomsday in the fight in Action Comics. But from what I'm reading in the solicitations, it doesn't sound like he's a good guy. And then there was one solicitation where it actually said it was for an Action Comics coming up. It's going to have a lenticulated cover. I don't know the number. Mm-hmm. And it said Mr. Oz's I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it in front of me, but it said Mr. Oz's identity will rock the last son of Krypton to his core, or something like that. Yeah. So it's got to be somebody Superman knows. And I thought it was odd that they used the phrase last son of Krypton. Now, maybe I'm just reading too much into it. Maybe who was ever writing that copy was just like, I've used Superman 3 times and Man of Steel 5. I need something else. What else do we call this guy? Oh, last son of Krypton. But I was reading in saying, well, why would they use last son of Krypton unless this is somebody connected to Krypton somehow and somebody powerful? So then I was thinking, well, who would rock that? And I was thinking, well, maybe his father, Jor-El. Maybe it's Jor-El, or maybe Jor-El from an alternate universe somehow. Because I have a feeling a lot of this is going to play out with multiverse stuff, with the Watchmen being in one universe and all that. So if I had a bet, I would say some kind of Jor-El for Mr. Oz, and somehow he's a villain, but he thinks he's the good guy. He thinks he's saving people. But yeah, it's got me really intrigued. They've done a great job at getting my curiosity and getting me to buy these comics.
There is another theory out there that I'm starting to lean towards, and I'm going to get the crises confused, so maybe you can help me. Which is the one where Superboy Prime punches reality that brings Jason Todd? Was that Identity or Infinite?
Infinite Crisis. Yeah.
Oh, the theory is that Superboy Prime hated the universe so much that he broke the reality and fractured all this stuff. So if the DC current Rebirth characters are missing 10 years of their life and their time, people are thinking that Oz could be Superboy Prime. That they want to pull a bait and switch and make you think Dr. Manhattan took all this time from reality, that it could be Superboy Prime instead. And that would tie in Jeff Johns' previous writing.
I could see that, because for a while, that's how DC explained any inconsistencies, that Superboy Prime punched the wall of the universe
right.
and caused it to happen. And I can't even remember the last time Superboy Prime was seen in the DC universe. And for some reason, I feel like it was before New 52.
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing him in New 52. And I do remember, like, the last time I saw him, and if I wish I could see it, and maybe he's been in here before this, but he was like on a different universe. I think actually on our Earth. I think he was supposed to be on our Earth, and he was looking at like comic books of what was going on in like Blackest Night or something like that. And he was all angry about the comic book, but he was like trapped, like they were saying, like he was trapped on our world. So, and Jeff Johns has written a lot of that Superboy Prime stuff, and he had him as, I think, in the Green Lantern Corps or something. And I think Jeff Johns wrote that Infinite Crisis as well. So if Jeff Johns is a big part of it, I definitely would put favorable odds on Superboy Prime being either in that cell or something that, or being Mr. Oz. But it's kind of weird. Why would he be called Mr. Oz? But who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll probably some off the cuff remark like, oh, that's why they called him Oz.
Yeah.
So,
We're sending you back to the future.
I had said that, I had been reading DC Comics solicitations before I'd even heard what a solicitation was. They used to come out in like a little free book you'd get at the comic store in the 80s and 90s called DC Direct Currents. I don't know. Did you ever get that? Do you remember that little book? And I would sit there. I would read every single solicitation over and over, even books I didn't read or get. I would read it just to know what was going on. And it's where I learned about a lot of this stuff. And it would make me buy a lot of books. In fact, sidebar, my first Superman book that I really was like, I got to buy this, turned out to be the origins of the Eradicator, just because I had read in Direct Currents this story of these astronauts going through cosmic rays or something and getting superpowers. I'm like, that's such a great idea. This is so cool. I got to buy this book. And having no idea it was a Fantastic Four ripoff and whatever they call that when it's like a direct ripoff, but they're ripping them off on purpose. No idea. Later on, when I read the Fantastic Four, and I was like, oh, okay, I see it. And then one of those astronauts turned out to be Hank Henshaw, who turned out to be the Eradicator, which turned out to be a fairly valuable book at one point. But anyway, so I've been reading these solicitations for decades. And in the solicitation for the latest Action Comics, I'm not sure which number, but it's the one where Oz's identity is revealed. It's had the sentence, it says, this will shake the last son of Krypton to his core. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's such an odd phrasing to refer to Superman as the last son of Krypton like this. That's not something you normally see in a solicitation. And it gave me a clue that Mr. Oz was somehow in some way connected to Krypton or Kryptonian for them to make that statement. And the most famous Kryptonian that could possibly be shaking Superman to his core would be his father, Jor-El. So that was my guess. And I said that somewhere, and you gave me credit on your YouTube channel. I heard you say that when you were doing your Batman Day haul. And I was like, hey, one person's giving me credit. So I had guessed Jor-El for a while now. And so I thought it was a cool twist, and I think it's a cool Mr. Oz. And now that we're getting into it, Mr. Oz is, I guess, the prisoner that Tim Drake said has escaped, and someone else had imprisoned them there, but now has lost interest in the prison. And I've noticed in Lonely Place of Living, a lot of times before they revealed in that book that it was Jor-El, his eyes were glowing red, like a Kryptonian, like Superman. And I'd like to go back and see if his eyes glow red in other books leading up to this as sort of like a nod to the Heat vision. But that was my number one guess. And if it wasn't Jor-El, I was thinking it was someone else who was Kryptonian.
Yeah. Maybe
those famous Kryptonians. I can't think of their names, but they were in All-Star Superman who come to Earth or something like that. Yeah. But what was your guess? I don't remember.
My guess would have been Superboy Prime.
That's right.
I think. Right. And I'm looking at, I have the original art from Superman 18 from Patrick Gleason. It's the one where Tim's pounding on the cell. Someone got out. And the picture of Mr. Oz, his eye is glowing red. Well, it's the pencil,
cool.
but his eye is red in that. So good pull on that one, Terrence.
Yeah, and you have the original art there to reference. How cool is that?
I'm looking at it right now. So that way I don't have to pull. And the other person in the cell, there's Doomsday it's a panel of Oz, then you get a panel of Oz walking away, a panel of Doomsday, a panel of somebody with their head on fire. I think that's Brimstone, and I don't remember in Rebirth where he was or how he got captured. And then it's the little panel of Tim, pounded on the glass. Mm-hmm. So then the other guess we had was who do we think is in the cell with Tim, or who could possibly be? There was the Connor Kents, the Bart Allens, the Cassie. I said the future Tim Drake from the New 52 when he became Batman Beyond. After Terry McGinnis came back, Tim went on his motorcycle and drove off into the sunset, and boom, he vanished. So I said, I would think that Tim's going to find himself there somehow, somewhere, and that was that can't be, it's impossible, or something like that. But I was kind of, sort of, technically correct. It's just a different version of Tim. So the 2005 Titans of Tomorrow, Tim Drake Batman, I did not see that coming a mile away. Yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, you were on this when you had mentioned the future Tim Drake. I just didn't think they'd have two Tim Drakes running around. I had thought, in wherever we had that conversation and wherever that went to, that it would have been Flashpoint Thomas Wayne as Batman. Yeah, you nailed it. And in reading in Newsarama, I had a really great interview with James Tynion the fourth, and he had said that was Jeff Johns' idea, that Jeff Johns had mentioned to him to use that. And James Tynion in the interview talks about how Jeff Johns' Teen Titans run, which, to be honest, it might get me kicked off the podcast, I have not read. I have got to get that and read that. But how that is what made him a Tim Drake fan, and that is what made him a huge DC Comics fan. And so from the start, it sounds really intriguing. I really like where they're going with it. The fact that Jeff Johns is in on this and he's like the head guru and he's got this whole doomsday clock thing means to me that, Tim Drake is going to be a huge part of this whole central DC universe story. I know I had to talk you off the ledge when Tim disappeared. So, and I'm like, he's got to be a big part. So I think there's big things for Tim Drake. And what's odd is they're kind of hinting that he may die again or disappear or something. And if you read the December solicitations, there's no mention of Tim Drake at all anywhere, which to me means he's there. They're purposely leaving him out to try to make you think. So, to me, that's like the red flag of he's there. They're doing this to try to psych you out. But January solicitation should be coming out fairly soon, I guess. But I'm looking forward to reading those Teen Titans issues, and I'm looking forward to seeing how all this plays out, because I guess in the interview, James Tynion basically said that it's a much darker, grimmer version of Tim Drake, and he's using guns. And so the young Tim Drake does not want to become this, but in order to not become it, he's got to affect the present in some way that is disastrous, and he may have to allow himself to become that in order to save people in the present. And so it's really interesting. And whatever it is, they thought long and hard about it and have been working really hard on it, and it's really well thought out. It's not just some last minute, hey, let's throw this together and see if people like it kind of thing. So I'm excited because I think it's going to be some really great storytelling.
Yeah, I've been slowly reading some of the Titans. I read the first volume of Jeff Johns, and this particular version, if you can find, I found this in a half-price bookshop. You can probably find it on Amazon for really cheap. It's Teen Titans, The Future Is Now. This is volume 4.
And then the other big thing was in the interviews and is evident in Lonely Place of Living, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Rob, for doing this, but Tim Drake's origin was rebooted horribly by Scott Lobdell, who some Tim Drake fans see as public enemy number one. You need a lobotomy for Lobdell just to get that out of my brain, a Lobdellomy. And so cover date November 2012, Teen Titans issue 0 is a rebooted Tim Drake origin, which is very, very different from what his origin was from year 3 and Lonely Place of Dying and the issues after that. I had put up today, which is September 30th when we record this, like a quick 15-minute review of Teen Titans 0 on the YouTube channel, nice. And just kind of went over the differences that were in the updated New 52 origin compared to the traditional pre-New 52 origin, and how much I hated them. And let's not get into it, but there was just a lot of changes to just make a change. Like, hey, let's just do this different. Let's do different. And there were a lot of changes that destroyed the heart of the character of Tim Drake, and it just did not go well with a lot of the fans. And so it looks like that 0 issue never happened. Like I said in the review, Dr. Manhattan was reading the 0 issue. He got so angry he used his powers to retcon everything and create James Tynion IV to fix everything. But so for Tim Drake fans, it looks like we are going back to the traditional Lonely Place of Dying origin for Tim Drake, which is a much better origin. It's just a much better story than Teen Titans 0 on every level whatsoever. The only question we have, I guess, and maybe this will come out in Lonely Place of Living, is what is the status of Tim Drake's parents? And I'm hoping that they're still alive. That was the only thing I liked about the new origin, was that both his parents were alive. Yeah. I hated Identity Crisis and them killing Jack Drake the way they did. I thought that was cheap. I thought that if this guy Metzler who wrote it had only didn't write comics, and this was there's a lot about that series I do not like, and that was one of them. If anyone had the right to do that, it was Chuck Dixon and Denny O'Neil. And I also, even from the beginning, I didn't like that Tim Drake's mom died right away. It's like, oh, you're a hero, now your parents have to die, like cliche. So I'm hoping that we'll see what's the status of the Drakes, and I'm hoping they're in the witness relocation program or hidden or something, because I think that would be cool going in the future, seeing the relationship with Tim and his parents, and not just see him brooding over a gravestone every couple of issues. What did you have? Well, I know how you feel, but what do you want to say about the new origin being the old origin?
Real quick, I can't remember if you were on this episode or not. Episode 16 of this show. It's the Future's End issue or episode we did, where we cover Teen Titans 0, Secret Origins issue 3, and then Batman 0 that had to deal with Tim Drake's New 52 origin. I think it was right after Sherry, you said you were up to 15 at one point, so she's probably already heard this already.
Yeah, and I was not on that episode. I was not on. Yeah,
that's right, because we had you were on episode 15. It was the end of Robin 1, and then going into very first night out with Tim Drake as Robin with Batman. But anyway, there were parts of it that I hated the New 52. Technically, Tim Drake was never his real name, the New 52. He took his middle name as Timothy and moved it to his first name. So, and like Witness Protection, you have to come up with a new identity. So he could have been Joe Timothy Smith, for all we knew, in the New 52. So, and that's something that Tynion had said in the interview, that he knew that, just like with Rebirth, you have to bring the character back to his core. And I think he did it wonderfully. And I don't want to, go down the road too much, because we're not even to the books we want to talk about yet. And we're going to cover all of this. But this made me happy as a Tim Drake fan. I think anybody that's a fan of Tim Drake is happy that he's back. It'd be kind of fitting if his mother would still be gone, that he would at least get his dad back. I kind of hope the whole witness protection thing is gone. It's not a thing. There'd be no need for that. So I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how this all plays out by the end of Lonely Place of Living. So I'll keep my comments short and sweet so we can move forward. Do you have anything else on Lonely Place of Living you want to get out?
Yeah, no, other than episode 16, looks like it was a solo show. It looks like it was just you. And in fact, somehow I don't think I ever listened to it. So I'm going to have to listen to that today. And I'm unfamiliar with that Secret Origins. And I'm very curious to... You're kind of a positive guy, so I'm sure you're trying to put a positive spin on everything in Teen Titans Zero. But I would love to like have you have a couple beers or something or Truth Elixir and just hear you go off on episode 0. We should probably maybe re-record that with just like, now that like you don't have to be nice about it, you can just let your true feelings show. And then I just so you know, on the YouTube channel, my review of episode of issue 0 of Teen Titans ended with me saying, if anyone would like to have a party where we could get together and burn our issues, leave a comment below. So that's how I feel about it. Although the artwork is actually good. The artwork is good. That's the only good thing about it. It's just a great time to be a Tim Drake fan right now and see like the classic Tim Drake coming back. And I've seen a couple calls. I think Travis, who's a good fan of ours, always kind of comments on stuff on Facebook, and maybe even Evan Ocasio, and maybe a couple other people. I think Ashton, Andrew. I'm trying to think of some of the people. Travis, Donovan, Christopher. They've all Al, Anthony. Kind of there's this general consensus of people, especially people who follow the Red Robin fan page with Ashley, want Tim Drake to have his own book. Tim Drake solo book. And I feel like that's where we're heading. I mean, if Batwoman got her own book spitting out of Detective Comics, I feel like there's going to be some kind of big Tim Drake Red Robin or something book coming out. And that is really awesome. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, same here. Well, I think this is where we'll put a pin in the Lonely Place of Living discussion. I know we could talk so much more, but we want to give you guys a chance to read the whole thing, us to read it, and then put all our thoughts together and really do a big show for it. So normally I don't say the music that's going to come up, but I knew since we were doing Prodigal, I'm thinking, what song could I put in here for Prodigal? A band that I like a lot is Seven Dust, and they have a song called Prodigal Son. So to segue into our discussion for the Prodigal, you can hear a little bit of Seven Dust singing a song called Prodigal Son. And when on the other side, we'll come back and talk about the first few issues of Batman Prodigal. See you on the other side.
Passing through this life with so much regret. I feels like I haven't got over it yet. It takes so long for these wounds to heal. I'm knocking down walls, taking my time. I gotta get out of here. Where will I go? Who will I become? I'm coming on like an elephant gun, reaching for the peace of mind that I can't find. The sun keeps fading away, searching for a feeling that will never come. The return of the prodigal son.
All right, that was my good friend Seven Dust So normally I don't even put up, who does the songs or whatever. I'm like, if you like it, you'll ask. If not, and sometimes there'll be music, sometimes there's not. I think there were a couple comments that were like, I liked when Rob put music in, so I'm trying to do a little bit of that. All right, before we continue, let's take a look at the information of these 3 comics here real quick. We're going to use the wonderful resource, Mike's Amazing World. It's a great resource if you want to find out who did what, who wrote what, who colored what. So the 3 books we're looking at today, the first book we're going to be looking at today is Batman 512. Had a cover date of November 1994. The on-sale date is September 13th, 1994. The editor is Dennis J. O'Neil. Title is Robin and Batman. Writer is Doug Mensch. Penciler is Mike Gustanovich. I love these names. Inker Romeo Tangal. Letters Ken Brunsniak. And the colorist is Adrian Roy. Batman, The Shadow of the Bat, number 32, had a cover date of November 1994. The on-sale date is November 20th, 1994. Again, the editor is Dennis J. O'Neil. No title in this one, and sometimes Shadow of the Bat has a title, but typically they don't for whatever reason. The writer, Alan Grant. Artist is Brett Blevins. Letter is Todd Kleen. Colorist is Adrian Roy. And then the final book for today is going to be Detective Comics 679. Had a cover date, again, of November 1994. The on-sale date is September 27th, 1994. The editor on this one is Scott Peterson. The title for this one is The Vermin Factor. The writer is Chuck Dixon. The penciler is Lee Weeks. The inker is Jeffs, if I'm saying that right, Rubenstein. The colorist is John Costanza, the letter is John Costanza, and the colorist is Adrian Roy. And a lot of these have been collected in various Batman Prodigal trades. They only had like one printing in 1998, and then the most recent up to this point is Batman Nightfall trade paperback that came out in 2002. But recently, the Robin Tim Drake solo series is getting reprinted, and Prodigal happens to be in the Robin trade that just recently came out. I think it's volume 4, but don't quote me on that. I haven't actually seen the full solicitation, but I think it is in volume 4. So let's go back to the show. So we're taking a look at Batman 512, Prodigal Part 1, by Mensch, and man, these names are always so horrible. Gustin, not going to pronounce that name. So you can read the names there on the bottom. This is a really cool cover. Killer Croc looks amazing on this shot, and kind of to show you the size of this. It's really kind of funny. It appears in a couple issues later with the rats on the side and a very small and tiny looking Dick Grayson Batman. What do you think of this cover to 512?
Yeah, it's a great cover. In fact, our good buddy Rich, when about 2 months ago or something, we were sending messages back and forth, and I messaged him about how we were going to do Prodigal, and he's like, "Oh man, that's the one with like that giant Killer Croc cover where it's like lit in the sewer and like, so like when I said Prodigal, like the first thing that popped in his mind was this cover. And I had mentioned before on the podcast that Killer Croc is one of the most varied artistically villains that in Batman comics.
Oh, like, yeah.
If you pulled, 2 decades of Batman comics, some of the characters, the Penguin looks like the Penguin, but Killer Croc has looked like all different things, and gray and green and huge. And so, but this, I kind of like, this is kind of like the Nightfall Killer Croc. Mm-hmm. It actually looks a lot like the Suicide Squad Killer Croc. It just maybe a little bit bigger, but I love the way it's lit from underneath with the flashlight and in the sewers, and just a great cover. Yeah, this is an awesome cover.
We had talked about this on, I shouldn't say the previous podcast, but in the real-time continuity, I guess, if you will, from the Zero Robin issue, that you had said that the dialogue is pretty much the same getting into the body of this Prodigal Part 1. I love the Batman logo. It says Robin and Batman, which I thought was a nice little nod to the original Batman logo, but instead of Batman on top, it's the Robin. I think that's pretty cool. But the dialogue is essentially the same from the Robin Zero issue, with Bruce stepping out and Dick taking over. I kind of want to get this out right at the very beginning. My other than the book kind of going through Batman, Shadow of the Bat, Detective Robin, I think those are the 4 books that the story travels through. The art kind of changes from person to person. If you didn't tell me that this was Dick Grayson as Batman, the art really doesn't depict any difference between Bruce and Dick at all. Even in the Batman Reborn, when Damian was Dick's Robin, the only thing that was different was the belt. They didn't really give Dick a different costume in this at all. And I wonder if that was part to, we had Azrael and all these crazy costumes at the very end, if the editors were like, okay, people want to see a traditional Batman. If I thought it'd been cool here to do without the oval on it. I'm probably being really nitpicky, but I always think the face in Prodigal looks like whoever's drawing the book is like, this is how he always draws Batman. That's, you know, there isn't like a little slimmer build to Dick Grayson as Batman. I know we're in the very first page, but I kind of wanted to get that out, that's going to be my criticism all the way through other than I really enjoyed this first issue. So did you have any issues, or were you just glad to see Dick Grayson as Batman and you really didn't care how he looked?
Oh my God, we're on the first page and already you're crapping all over the story that I love. Well, yeah, that is definitely something that kind of jumps out at you, that the artistic wise, they look exactly the same. The thing is, if you were reading this in real time, like I was, and then was kind of again for the podcast, you haven't seen this Batman in so long. You've seen As-Bats for a good part of a year and a half or so. So even though it does have that, he looks exactly the same, you're just kind of happy to see it back and see him teamed up with Robin again. Yeah. So it doesn't really bother me. And my feeling would be, it's in real life, if this was real life, Dick Grayson would deliberately be trying to make himself look like Bruce Wayne, the original Batman, in every way, to try to make it appear as if the old guy's back. Although, and I do like in the series how Commissioner Gordon is not fooled by it. That is cool. And I think I had told you, and this is on our sister podcast, Batman and Robin Eternal podcast, Volume 2, how much I love Prodigal. And hadn't read it in probably 15 years, maybe, or maybe even 20, and was a little worried about going back, like, oh, does it hold up? Like I thought I did, because of this time period, Nightfall, Nightquest, all that. I always thought Prodigal is what I liked the most. Prodigal was so great. And it does hold up for me. Having reread it recently, I think it's fantastic. I think because I've read all this Jean Paul Valley stuff, it's the same feeling of like, all right, it's Batman again. And I had forgotten, but was shocked at just how much Tim Drake is in this story. Yeah. I mean, it's like every single issue, whether it's the Robin series or Batman or Detective or Shadow of the Bat, Tim Drake's, it's like co-characters, like this, like the logo says, Robin and Batman. And in a lot of ways, Tim Drake is in sort of the Batman role of like mentoring Dick Grayson in it, and Dick Grayson's the one who's kind of like, I don't know if I can do this, and Tim is the one saying, yeah, no, you can do this, you got this, and like the exuberance of like, yeah, Batman and Robin are back again is what you see out of Tim, is what you feel as a reader. So once again, you're very much like Tim Drake is the eyes and ears that you're reading and seeing this story through. So man, we talk a lot for the first page. We're on page 1. Yeah. We're like, we'll go through it quick. We're like, hour later, we're like, all right, page 2 has, But anyway, did you read this real time as it came out, or did you come to it after?
No, I came into this real time, and that's where, I was nitpicking on the costume. I absolutely love Prodigal, and we talked about it on the podcast. I was afraid, because it's been about 15 years, like you said, since I read it last, and I was really chomping at the bit to get to this point, even more so than Nightfall, that like, I hope this is as good as I remembered it. I think with everything with Rebirth and then just the excitement for this, I was like, yeah, this tastes like that wonderful dessert you ate that one time and go, oh, I haven't had this in years, I hope. Or maybe that restaurant, I'm like, hope the food is still good there. So yeah, and I love this.
Go ahead. Yeah, and to comment on your costume story. I do think there was a little bit of let's make Dick Grayson look as much as the traditional Jim Aparo 80s Batman, because the storyline directly after this, if I'm saying it right, is a 4-part story called Troika, and in that they changed Batman's costume and to where he no longer had like the underwear on the outside and it was all black with the oval. And they even had the covers like slowly getting, it's like the same image of Batman like standing with his arms in fists, but it kept getting darker and darker until Batman 515, which is completely black. You can't even see it. And they charge $250. They charge you extra for the black cover. And it kind of turned out to be a little bit of hype and a bust because the cape is used so much and there's so much shadowing and coloring that you never really quite noticed the difference. But I think they intended this change in the suit to be more dramatic than it was. So I do feel like Dick Grayson, that's one of the reasons why Dick Grayson in here looks so much like 80s Aparo Batman, because I think the intention was that there'd be a more dramatic change coming when Bruce came back as Batman, although artwork-wise it didn't quite kind of live up to it.
Right. Well, since we talk so much over the first page, we're going to totally skip the rest of this book and go right into now. Just to kind of go through, we've had Killer Croc. The first time we've seen him after his arm was broken by Bane after getting flushed in the sewer, which was the last time Tim had been in contact with Killer Croc since he was down in the sewer with Bane and Killer Croc both. And he has a nice little meal before he swims away. And that's something with Killer Croc, that he's always going right for the jugular and everything like that. Something that I had forgotten going into page 5 is I forgot that Alfred isn't back yet. It's actually Dick who goes to London and brings Alfred back. So we spend a little bit with Dick and Tim kind of in Wayne Manor now that nightfall has settled, and Dick kind of, going through that Wayne Manor used to be such a bustling place, and there were people and dinner parties, and Dick would always be watching from the top of the stairs, and Wayne Manor's still kind of in shambles a little bit. There's Tim going, oh, I miss Alfred, like, oh, you can cook, and Dick's like, oh yeah, I can cook, and had an apartment by himself. So I thought this was a nice little section. It also shows how much Dick has grown as a character. He hasn't had a butler. He's having to not only be Batman, but he's got to be man of the house. And even though he's being a mentor to Tim, he's still kind of wrestling, with some things. So what did you think of this little section here?
Yeah, the Killer Croc stuff was cool. It looks like he's got like casts or bandages on his arms from the Nightfall beating he took from Bane, which I thought was pretty cool. There's a flashback scene with Dick where he's like thinking about like hiding behind the stairs, which I used to do that as a kid. He like hide in the stairs and listen to the adult conversation, and he gets caught by Alfred. And that's really great to show like what Alfred meant to him as a kid, but also those panels could have been right out of Year 3. Like I thought it was a real good tie back to that whole Lonely Place of Dying in Year 3 origin with Tim Drake and all. So yeah, I really like that.
So we had to get a little recap in 10 of the sewer battle with Bane and Killer Croc, where Tim witnesses everything. I feel like right away that they kind of already know it's Killer Croc, but it's written in a way that it makes you feel like, well, they're not entirely sure, but they kind of think it's Killer Croc. So I feel like these first few issues are kind of like really cool one-and-done stories that kind of tie everything together. I like how on page 12 that Batman and Robin borrow from Dad from Wayne Enterprises, Marina division, and use like a Wayne boat instead of a Bat boat, which I kind of thought was odd that they wouldn't be using a Bat boat, but we'll take this bright red boat out as Batman and Robin. And then we get another little recap on 14 of in the back of Dick's mind. We have kind of the 0 issue story of Dick recounting his first confrontation with Two-Face, which will play as the underlining major story of Prodigal. So we get another look at that here. So what do you think about these first few sections of Killer Croc kind of going on the rampage and Batman and Robin tracking Croc down?
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's almost like Dick Grayson, since he's been out of the Batcave and being Nightwing with the Titans, doesn't really even know who Killer Croc is.
Yeah.
And looking it up, Killer Croc was a fairly new Batman villain at this time. This is, coming out in 94, and it said Croc made his first appearance in 83. So he would have only been around for about 11 years. And I don't think he was used that much. Like now he's become one of the mainstays, and he was used, really well on the animated series, which really kind of thrust him into the spotlight, and in the Legos games and things like that. He's been used a lot, and now in Suicide Squad and the Arkham games, he's one of the top guys. But at the time, I'd like to go back and get a list of his appearances. I don't think he was in too many Batman books between 83 and 94.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a cool thing that like Dick's catching up on the time that he missed. And yeah, this is kind of cool. I like Croc being just kind of a bloodthirsty monster here, just like going for the jugular and killing people. In the midst of all this, there's also a little callback to the Zero issue we did with Ryan, where Dick was Robin and Batman, and what was it, the police commission, not the police commissioner, but the somebody was, were being hung, and Two-Face made him decide between which one, which then Ryan had looked up and found that was part of a storyline that Chuck Dixon did. Was that Robin Year One that he did, or something like that?
Yeah, Robin Year One, yep.
Yeah, so you could see, even though this story was written by Doug Moench, there was definitely probably a lot of talk of that going around in the editorial room, and they're setting things up for even later. So that I thought was pretty cool.
And I like how Dick plays that he knows exactly what Croc is talking about. I'm sure Dick's going into this fight going, I have no idea what he's talking about, but apparently Bane and Croc had this fight, and I just like how Munch plays with Dick and Killer Croc's reaction back and forth to one another, that Dick's got to be keeping up on his feet so he doesn't act like, I don't know what you're talking about, because in fact Batman would. So I thought that was a nice little bit of dialogue. It's basically a lot of punch and run out through the rest of the issue here, where at one point it looks like Croc gets the upper hand on Dick, but thanks to some fancy footwork, literally, by Tim and Dick, they're able to get Croc wound up in the net, and looked like somebody did get a couple shots at Killer Croc through the net that he was in, so they've got to get an ambulance and everything like that. So I think for the very first fight that Dick had as Batman, I think is realizing he's got a lot of homework that he's going to need, and why Robin is really important to him right now, that these villains that Dick's coming up with for the very first time, the only reference that he has is his partner, which, like we were saying in the beginning, is their role is reversed. Batman's the lead, but Dick's really having to lean on Tim for a lot of emotional support, and that you can do this. And I thought that just was really cool. So that's all of issue 1. You have any thoughts for the ending of issue 1 there?
Well, describing it, you said Croc gets the upper hand on Dick.
Oh,
let's keep this PG here, buddy.
Yes.
Let's keep but no, I like the fight sequence because both Batman and Robin are pretty skilled in the fighting. There's none of that. There's no like, oh, Robin messes up and come save me, Batman, or anything like that. Like, they both take down the guys pretty good. And even when Croc gets the upper hand on Batman and is squeezing the life out of him, Batman saves himself. Like, he boxes his ears and saves himself. So it's not like come save me or anything like that. It's like there's a struggle, but they get out of it. And in the midst of the fighting, are you reading this in trade paperback or in the floppies?
No, I'm reading in the floppies.
So in between pages 20 and 21, there's a cool DC Universe comics coloring demystified. Do you see that with
yes.
of Robin 1? Yeah, that is really cool. We need to take a scan of that and put it on the Facebook page or something. But that is really cool about how all that goes into just coloring it and stuff. That's a really cool thing. Mm-hmm. And then the ending, the last page has got some more of that Gordon stuff that we were talking about, how he's very skeptical.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch the TV show Weird Science?
Yes.
On the back cover? Yeah, that show. That was a girl from what you call it, Kingpin. Did you ever see that movie?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, she's amazing looking. Because I saw in a thing, the guys who did Kingpin, they watched Weird Science, and they're just like, we've got to make a movie with her. So that was the whole reason for the movie. So yeah, that was quite a lustful teenage night watching that. Oh well, memory lane. So.
All right, let's move into our second book, Batman Shadow of the Bat, Prodigal Part 2. Terrence, why don't you take us away with this one?
Yeah, you know what's kind of weird about this is it's the cover is like a 2-part cover with Two-Face. So if you have Prodigal Part 6 and put them together, it makes one big cover with half of Harvey Dent and Batman on 32, and then Tim Drake Robin and the Two-Face side, or Big Bad Harv, on 33, and the coin. But it's kind of weird that they're not consecutive parts in the story of Prodigal,
right?
But consecutive issues in the book. So it's just kind of a weird thing, but not that big a deal. And then Shadow of the Bat always opens up with like a cover page, I guess you'd call it, or a title page, I guess you'd call it, which I don't know if that was just their way of like not having to do an extra page for the book or anything, because I don't think there's like less stuff, but maybe it was because their letter column sometimes was only 1 page long. So, Rob, I've gone over the cover and the title page. Why don't you give us your impression of the title and cover page and take it from there?
My note was the same that you had with the cover. Scarface is one of those, as we're getting into the story, I knew he was in the story, but I guess I didn't realize where he was. So, like, early on, I was like, oh, it's Scarface. And, I mean, I like the character. It can be done well. I like Scarface more when Chuck Dixon is doing something with Scarface. But, again, I don't want to crap on the story. This is probably the weakest book in Prodigal for me, just because it's so Scarface heavy. I love the stuff with Two-Face in this. I'm not trying to skip out of Two-Face. He wants to be the big bad boss, and, he's going to corkscrew somebody to death, which I thought was really kind of gruesome. But I do like the way Scarface is played, where people know, like, if I had a puppet on my hand, they'd be looking at me going, Rob, you have a stupid puppet on your hand. And the Scarface is so convincing, like, no, look at me. I'm the one you're looking to, not this dummy back here. And the ventriloquist is like, oh, that's right, Scarface. I'm hearing the animated series. I like that version of Scarface more than I do in the comics, I think. I found the Scarface stuff less interesting. The things that I liked are, Two-Face. It's time for like their parole hearing, or we're moving stuff. They even make mention of, wanting to get the paperwork. We need some computers, and we've got Dick and Tim kind of sweeping up the cleaning that hasn't been done in Wayne Manor. But the thing I think is really interesting out of here is how Two-Face gets out of jail. A clerical error. They're calling for Kent Harvey, Harvey Kent. And he's like, yeah, I'm Harvey Kent. They're like, all right, dude, why don't you get out? And that's it. There's no major break. There's no nothing going on. It's Two-Face gets to walk right out the front door and gets to do pretty much whatever he needs. So we'll spare the Scarface portion unless you want to get into a little bit of Scarface. But what do you think of this? Is really setting up Two-Face's major part coming up in a few issues, but this is him getting out. What'd you think of all that?
Yeah, the Scarface stuff is always weird, because I think eventually they start to try to make it seem that he was carved from like wood that was like cursed or magic, and that maybe he does have like powers, and it's not just the ventriloquist who's psycho and all this other. And then there was a female ventriloquist. It gets really confusing and muddled and everything like that. So as I read it too, I'm still kind of like, well, is it just a sad, crazy guy who's throwing his voice, or is there some kind of mystical thing going on, or what's that? And I do like the cleanup, and you get the sense with Tim that he's just like thrilled to be hanging out with Dick Grayson. Like, this is a guy who he idolized. You know, he rode his little bike to the circus to find him. He knows he was Robin. Plus, he's just a cool guy. Plus, he's the older guy. Like, you know what it's like when you're 15 and you get to hang out with like someone who's like 18 or 19 who's like a cool dude. And, like, you're just like, I don't care. What are we doing? Sweeping, eating a banana here? Like, this is awesome. Like, you know, like, like there's even Tim's like bicycle out in front of Wayne Manor there. That's so cool. You don't care what it is. Like, it's cool just to be hanging out. And, you know, the Two-Face thing getting out of jail is a little ridiculous, but I think at this point, we've seen like 80 billion jailbreaks. It's kind of funny to just have like a clerical error. Like, yep, that's me. And like the cops are just so overwhelmed, and only in Gotham would they just be like, all right, go, you're free. So I did kind of like that. It'd be annoying if they did that next issue and then the issue after that and the issue after that. But just to have it like a one-time thing, that was pretty cool. Yeah.
And I like in page 8 where Dick and Tim are going down to the Batcave, and Dick is reminiscing about, you know, these are the very same stairs. And this I thought was interesting. So many nights Bruce and I came down here these stairs together, and then Batman and Robin emerged from the bottom. So are we to believe that Batman and Robin, or Dick and Tim, are walking through a certain part of the cave, and all of a sudden they turn into Batman and Robin? Do they go off to the side of the steps, dress? Like, in the back of your mind as a kid, you know, Batman and Robin slide down the poles and instantly they're Batman and Robin. But here it's like, it's a little odd. Or is it just more of Dick talking about this fanciful, you know, image of they walk down as, you know, Bruce and Dick, and then magically they're Batman and Robin? So I thought that was interesting, but kind of like it's almost played like, no, this is what happens. So what'd you think about their quick change?
Yeah, it seems more like an artistic license than an actual practical, like, they get changed going down the stairs. But, I remember as a kid, the old Batman show with them sliding down the pole as, you know, Bruce and Dick, and then coming down the pole as Batman and Robin, and being in elementary school, and kids, like, drawing designs of how it would work, and like these mechanical arms would come out and take their pants off and put their tights on, and the cow would come on through gravity. Like, people were like really intense on that. And of course you ask an adult and they're like, oh, they just cut the camera. It's just, you know, it's a camera trick. You're like, what? No, it's not, you know, but, that to me seemed a little more just for the artistic effect than an actual like practical effect. But, you know, it's kind of cool. I like Tim's enthusiasm of like, just like the old days, and he's just all into it. So it's kind of impractical, but it's kind of cool in the same way.
Yeah. The basic part for the rest of this story is about said Two-Face is the ventriloquist going around to people that have wronged him, and it's
and oh, sorry to interrupt, but before you get too further, just a little bit more with that Dick and Tim thing. So on the next page 9, after they come down the stairs, they have that information on Vetch, and so they're just like, well, who would do this or whatever? Like, let's ask the computer, and they just type it in the computer, and it comes up a ventriloquist and his dummy, and it was funny because that was what I said in the Zero issue, was in your reading in the book that you had with the Kool-Aid on it, The Case of the Laughing Sphinx. Like, it's just like, let's just pop it in the computer and come up with these 4, and I'm like, oh, that's such a kid book. And here it is in my favorite storyline, Prodigal, and they do the same thing. And once again, it seems as if Dick Grayson has no idea who this guy is, because he even says, I've been out of Gotham too long, so this is a new one to him. But I just wanted to bring that up. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, no, yeah, I completely forgot about that beat. And this is, if I remember correctly, this is Alan Grant. He had said that coming into writing for Batman, he had a hard time writing like Penguin, Riddler, and Joker and the big classic ones. He felt like he was painted into a corner. So he just created a whole bunch of new villains like Anarchy, Ventriloquist, Mr. Zaz, so he could kind of write them the way that he would want to write his stories rather than fit an already existing villain and try and make it fit. So this is clearly after Dick Grayson was Robin. So this, I think, works for me a little bit more than the Killer Croc, that Dick Grayson has had no affiliation with the ventriloquist at all. So I kind of like a Batman that knows he needs to be a step ahead but has no idea how to get there and is really relying on Tim to get him there.
Yeah, and he's an even newer character because his first appearance was 1988.
Yeah.
And these are books that are 94, so that's only a 6-year gap. And in comic time, 6 years is what, like 5 months or so?
Yeah.
So Ventriloquist was really new at this time. And just to throw it out there, if anybody cares, when I looked up when Scarface's first appearance was, that thing I was talking about with like the wood, he was introduced to as Woody, a dummy carved from the remains of the former Blackgate Gallows.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where that whole cursed wood thing comes from and all that. So yeah, who knows? Anyway, back to Prodigal.
Not trying to zip through this book, but it's Batman and Robin, thanks to the Bat computer doing their great detective work like it always does. They're able to find out that there was a double cross that Scarface had set up to basically take out the competition. That each one of them would take out each other. That Scarface put, had set some grenades that the rival gangs were throwing back and forth, and the two gangs are realizing that they've been double crossed. And a lot of death happens in these next few pages in Batman and Robin. A spot that I like in 16 is seeing the fluidity of Dick Grayson jumping in the middle of the panel as Batman doing some somersaults, which you don't typically see Batman doing that type of movement as, somebody that's been on the trapeze. Batman's trying to find where Whisker is, and Batman and Robin taken off. And the thing that I like best about page 17 is him threatening the guy here, and then as Batman and Robin swing away, Tim says that was a nice bluff. Jean-Paul would have beaten it out of him. Dick just says that's why he lost his job, that Jean-Paul didn't realize where the line was drawn, that Bruce would take it to that line and maybe even go one step farther. But Dick has seen Batman do this type of interrogation enough that he knows where to kind of press at the villain to get the information out of it and not go all the way. So that's kind of reminding us, the reader, where the real Batman should be relying on. Yeah, and not to crap on the issue, but Brett Blevins is not my favorite of the Batman artists, and I just think sometimes it's too his lines are too thick, and that his bodies are too big and lumpy, and like even the scene with Dick Grayson on page 4 sweeping, and right here on page 17, like you mentioned, like his arms and stuff, they're just way too big and bulky for an acrobat for what I would think of as Nightwing. And that gets back to what you were saying in the beginning about how he's drawn a lot the same way as Bruce. Yeah. The end of this, I think, moves rather quickly here. The ventriloquist is eventually captured by Batman and Robin. They're able to figure out where the ventriloquist is going. They get to the Whiskers. I always want to say Whiskers. He's about to get a corkscrew through the nose in 19 when Batman and Robin do break through. The ventriloquist ends up dropping Scarface as Batman catches Scarface as he's trying to leave. I'm blanking here who ends up picking up the ventriloquist dummy, but has instructions to go to a safe to get a book out, and it's to how to throw your voice. And the issue ends with Two-Face flipping his coin, getting ready to get destruction and anarchy going in Gotham City. So what did you think about Shadow of the Bat 32 being the second issue in Prodigal? Yeah, like you said, it's probably the weaker. I do think it's kind of a cool last 2 pages. Whatever I said about the art before, it is a really gruesome looking, cool artwork of Two-Face's face on the last page. That is really cool. And I do like the idea of this big, dumb, muscle guy, like finding the how to throw your voice book and all that. And like the ventriloquist will continue on. And I prefer it not to be a cursed piece of wood and to just be, like the insanity of Gotham in people. But overall, I think the highlight for me, oddly enough, stands out is the scene with, Tim and Dick just kind of sweeping up and just doing some good old male bonding and stuff like that goes to the heart of the characters, and it's kind of like the heart of the book. And that's the kind of stuff that I
liked in Prodigal. That's the kind of stuff that made me furious that they got rid of in the New 52, even though Dan DiDio and Jim Lee had promised the Bat books would be, the least messed with books. They'd stay the most similar, and then they were the most messed with books. I'm glad that we're getting it back with Lonely Place of Living. So, overall, to be the weakest link in a really strong chain is not that bad. So,
that's right. All right, so our last book for today is Detective Comics 679, written by Chuck Dixon, art by Lee Weeks, and Rubenstein must be doing the inks or letters. Let me look in here. Yeah, guest inker. And Lee Weeks did the guest pencils. And my book has a wonderful signature by Lee Weeks. Does yours have a signature by Lee Weeks?
It does not. Did you meet him at a convention or something?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, and I had put this down. I said, I love Prodigal, and he said he really was glad he got to do part of Prodigal. I said, anytime I can do draw Dick Grayson, he said, especially Dick Grayson as Batman was really pretty cool. So I'll put an image of this on the podcast so you can see the signed book's really cool. So an image of the rat catcher. This, to me, the Ratcatcher is Z-list Batman villain as you can get. But the funny thing about a Z-list Batman villain, sometimes a Z-list Batman villain is better than a Superman A villain.
Yeah, exactly.
So, what do you think about the cover here? I think it's a really cool image of, Batman leaping at the Ratcatcher. But I go, Ratcatcher. This could have been Killer Moth.
Yeah. I love this cover. Great cover. I love just like the brightness of the smoke and then the darkness on the sides and then Batman coming in. It's just a great cover. And Lee Weeks here's the guest penciler. And, he just did, which I really liked. And I heard the Batman on Film guys talking, too, about how great it was. The Batman Elmer Fudd special.
Yes.
And that was really cool. And that his artwork on that was really great, too. So Lee Weeks stepping in here as the guest penciler. I really enjoyed his art. But, yeah, Ratcatcher's not only is he a Z-list, he's also like a copy of the Pied Piper from the Flash Rogues Gallery.
Yeah.
So he's a Z-list copy of a Z-lister.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the Pied Piper may work better. I'm going to have to retract that statement. I think the Pied Piper may work better as the villain than the Ratcatcher.
Yeah.
This whole parole opening for the Ratcatcher, do you have anything to say for yourself? Well, let me pull this, little flute I whittled out of shop class. Wouldn't you know that the Ratcatcher talks to rats and he probably does something like this? And you're going to allow him handcuffed to pull something out of his pocket? You think there's two guards behind him who's like, oh, no, it's just a flute, Bob. Just relax. He's going to play us a song. So
yeah, they got his legs cuffed. They got his hands cuffed. They got everything cuffed. But, yeah, let him play a song. Yeah, it is a little weak. And there are a lot of rats that come very quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I do like Chuck does a really good job of describing, it's high-pitched, it's a dull shrill through my skull, and the lady says she can feel it more than she can hear it, so apparently this flute is deadly. I mean, he's no Jethro Tull, but maybe this is where I'll insert a Jethro Tull, a little flute right there.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's a little weak in that Batman and Robin are so worried about the Ratcatcher that they're hanging out by his parole window because they just know something's going to happen. But yet, why aren't they in there disguised as a police officer or something?
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and then Ratcatcher just gets away way too quick, and it's so. But I'll let you comment on that. But yeah, I thought this was a weak opening. I love Chuck Dixon. I love this series. I love everything about this, but it's definitely kind of a weak opening.
Yeah. I love the shot on the page isn't numbered. It's after the Mortal Kombat 2 ad. If you're looking at your book here digitally, then you'll it's almost a half-shot page of Batman and Robin, like Terence said, waiting kind of outside the window, perched on gargoyles. I think that's really cool. Seeing both their capes billowing and then the chair flying through. But yeah, to me, it's a little on the weak side of kind of how, like, we think something might happen, but in case it doesn't, we're not going to go in.
It's almost like Chuck Dixon was told, like, hey, you're going to have this guest penciler, this great artist, Lee Weeks. And it was more like, what cool stuff could I have Lee Weeks draw, as opposed to what makes like this amazing story. Like, oh, it'd be cool to have Batman up on a ledge, and it'd be cool to have all these rats and stuff like that. But, yeah, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah. The artist, I think, is fantastic through this. You know, the rat catcher getting away on the roof and the rats coming out, and Dick even tells Tim to stay put, don't let him bite you, don't know if there's rabies, and doesn't listen and goes darting around Batman and falls off. And thanks to Tim, the rat catcher gets away. And I like this was a good idea, back to square one. So even though they had the forethought to stand out there, Tim kind of, ruined it for him to kind of show that even though Dick is a novice at being Batman, he's not a novice at being a good crime fighter or vigilante. So it's kind of nice to see, as this kind of moves through a little bit, that Tim's doing some homework back in Drake, and Tim's dad's still there, and wanted to take his son out to a match.
Knock. Hey, yeah. Tim, turn down the third base. I'm trying to concentrate. Yeah. Yeah, it's a tennis racket on the tickets. Yeah. Oh, actually, sorry to interrupt. It's the most generalized sporting event ever. This is the dialogue. I have tickets to the tennis open at the arena.
Yeah.
Would you like to see the team play the sport at the place? No, not really, Dad. Yeah.
We can buy a hot dog and drink a cola.
I'll let you play some rock and roll on the radio as we go there.
Dad, you're trying too hard.
Yeah.
The thing I thought was interesting is Tim's the only Robin with a set of parents, at least right now. So he's kind of complaining on one hand. He's not getting a lot of time to be Robin, and his dad's wanting to spend time with him. You got to think this is running through the back of Tim's or Dick's mind, and probably even Bruce's sometimes. Like, you could go be with your dad. What would Dick give to spend time with his dad? Where Tim says this is a lousy time for the rat catcher to come up, and Dick says, be thankful you have those kinds of problems, Tim. You almost lost your dad twice.
And then there's the return of one of my favorite characters. I love Harold. Mm-hmm. He was in All-Star. Did you see him in All-Star Batman?
Yes.
A couple months ago? Yes. So I guess he's back in continuity. I was so angry when they took him out in Hush. What a waste that was. But I just love Harold. I love the idea of Harold that, this isn't a one-man crusade, that you got to have somebody fixing the Batmobile and making this stuff, and it's such a, I don't know. I just really like Harold. I like seeing him here.
We have Dick and Tim having a conversation in the Batcave, and then that kind of moves on to Batman being in with Commissioner Gordon, and kind of talking about the Ratcatcher. But more importantly, Commissioner Gordon at one point turns his chair around and says, "I'll make it easier for you this time. Rather than you disappearing through the window, you can just leave now." And the expression that Lee Weeks gives Dick of, like, Gordon knows what's going on. You may be able to fool Gordon once, maybe, but Gordon knows this is not the Batman that he's been dealing with, essentially the whole entire time. So I thought that was really pretty cool that Gordon knows exactly what's going on. So Dick's going to have to tread lightly around Gordon, knows that he can't pull any punches with him. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, pages 11 and 12 make up for any shortcomings the beginning of the book might have had, because this is like, the artwork on this is amazing. It's all dark, except it's just lit by a lamp on Gordon's desk that he keeps turning and like lighting up Batman and moving around. And then there's like the shadow from like the Venetian blinds. And there's this whole like exchange where Gordon's like, well, what about that other guy, the armored one? Is he gone for good? And Dick is like, yes. And he's like, at least there's that. And then there's some more dialogue, but Dick says, nothing has to change, Commissioner. And Commissioner Gordon's like, everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything. Like, you're kind of like, what does he mean by that? What's going on? Like, those 2 pages are just fantastic. Those 2 pages are just amazing.
So we have Two-Face in a bar, and he basically just takes out anybody because he's sitting in somebody else's seat, and he's ready to kind of assert himself back into Gotham. And then we have this this section with, I love you, Chuck, I love you very much, but this whole section with the Ratcatcher, I think it's just due, like, Chuck does a really good job with the Ratcatcher, with who and what the Ratcatcher is. And you're kind of sympathizing. He, is kind of in the underbelly. Nobody appreciated what he was doing, so he's kind of making people pay in Gotham City, and that the only friends that the Ratcatcher really had are his rats, and they're the only ones that understand. So I was just like, I think it's just more on the limitations of who the Ratcatcher is. I think Dixon does a really good job with what he's given as a character, but I think it's kind of almost like Nightfall putting Dick through the paces of the lower list villains until you get to the big dance with Two-Face.
Yeah, and the thing that makes this is the artwork.
Oh,
like
yeah.
the scenes with the rats underground are creepy. The lighting and the coloring with the Ratcatcher going through the sewers are just awesome. So whatever like story might be a little weak, the artwork far and away makes up for it. And you can just imagine this whole underground labyrinth of Gotham. And I think it's books like this that when I went and saw The Dark Knight Rises and see Bane in the sewers and all that talk of the sewers, like, this is what was in my mind and what I was imagining of underground Gotham. And that's what I was seeing in that movie, and the two kind of connected, and I thought it was great. And the Ratcatcher, I'm looking it up here. His first appearance was in April of 1988, created by Alan Grant, John Wagner, and Norm Breyfogle. So he's another one of these Alan Grant, I don't know the continuity, so I'm just going to make up villains.
Right.
And it's kind of cool that Dick is facing villains that he's never seen before or come across, that were not around when he was Robin, but we're building up to this confrontation of him with Two-Face, who was critical in the new post-Zero Hour Dick Grayson origin of him being Robin, and this momentous thing of him being Robin and having to save Batman or the other guy and everything. So it's kind of cool because you got the best of both worlds. You got Dick meeting these new guys, but the build up to a Two-Face confrontation as well.
Yeah, I agree totally. And the cool thing I had forgotten while I was, prepping for this is seeing the Bat Train. So I thought it was kind of cool to see the Bat Train back in there. And this kind of moves pretty quickly here. Batman's able to find out through the sewers where the Ratcatcher is, and he has a little device to kind of send the rats away, to kind of do the opposite of what the Ratcatcher is doing. He put a couple little computer and radio transmitters on them. He figured that 4 of the rats would be able to find the Ratcatcher, since the Ratcatcher was calling the rats to him. And Batman makes quick work of the Ratcatcher, and Dick kind of leaves us with Two-Face is a whole nother story, and he's realizing that Killer Croc and Ventriloquist and now Ratso, I thought that was kind of funny, were dangerous in their own right, but still the minor leagues, and he knows that these may have been a little tougher for him to kind of deal with, just being that they're new. He knows that somebody larger is on the rise, and realizing that he now knows that just due to a clerical error that Two-Face is free, which has got to rub a little bit of salt in the wound. It's not a breakout, that he just clearly walked out of the front door, that now this thing that's been in the back of Dick's mind, he's going to have to kind of confront all over again with Two-Face. So what'd you think of the end of Detective Comics and our good friend the Ratcatcher here?
Yeah, I think it's cool that Dick and the writers and creators acknowledge these are minor league characters. So it's, I think it's a cool build up for them, that it wasn't like first story take on the Joker. It's kind of cool. Robin's not in these last few pages because he's at the tennis match at the arena with his dad. So even though there's no Robin, I think it's kind of cool that, he is with his dad, and that Dick would be like, you need to, spending time with your father is just as much, or even more important, I should say, more important than going out with me to catch the Ratcatcher, and I can get this guy, so no problem. And yeah, it's cool because it's an ending, but it entices you to want to read the next issue, to read Robin 11. And so from that perspective, it's a great third issue of a 10-part series.
Yeah.
And that's all I got to say on it. I'm done. Prodigal. Sorry.
No, this has been one of, I mean, we're only 3 issues into Prodigal, but I'm really excited to where Prodigal is going to take us, and the things that I'm remembering that I really liked about this story are really starting to come through with each issue. So I think that's where we're going to put a pin in it. We went just a little long here, but we kind of wanted to set up the next episode properly to get a Robin issue in part 4 of Prodigal. And I think we'll see you guys in a couple weeks. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. It means a lot to us. Keep the questions and comments coming to us, and we'll be reading comments and questions on the air. So on the behalf of Terence and our good friend Ryan, who's not with us today, this is Rob, and you've been listening to the BatmanUniverse.net, and more importantly, you've been listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake. Take care. Thanks for listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake podcast. This has been brought to you by the BatmanUniverse.net. Tim Drake, Robin, and all Batman-related characters are the copyright of DC Comics. This podcast is solely for entertainment purposes, so no infringement is intended by this show. This show is not a good revenue stream. Actually, there's not a stream at all. All music and sound clips are under copyright by their respected copyright holders. So there should be no need to send the Penguins lawyers after us for ill-gotten gains, because there are none. You can get a hold of the show a few different ways. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. You can also email in at robineltdpodcast@yahoo.com. Our Facebook page can be found at www.facebook.com/everyonelovesthedrake. And as always, you can message directly over at the BatmanUniverse.net. So email, tweet, or message us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll read your comments or responses on the show. The show you're listening to can be found a few different ways through iTunes and Windows Media, also over at our host, TVU. Leave us a review on iTunes if you listen there. It'll help spread the word of the show. Make sure you head over to the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and Robin. Thanks for listening to the show and hearing why everyone loves the Drake. We'll see you in a few weeks. Take care.
Let's go on and give them their money's worth.